The D-Day operation on June 6, 1944 marked the largest amphibious invasion in military history. Codenamed Overlord, it seamlessly integrated land, air and sea forces. The combined forces were assigned into 5 distinct assault groups, each assigned a codename: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. When considering a suitable date for such a massive assault, several critical conditions had to be met. Quiet weather for 48 hours before D-Day to allow the assault convoys to sail from their base harbours and form up. Cloud cover below 8,000 feet, not exceeding 30%, with a minimum cloud base of 2,500 feet. Ensuring optimal conditions for aircraft transporting parachutists and towing gliders. Low tide coinciding with dawn on D-Day to facilitate smoother beach landings. And the chosen date should fall within 1 day before to 4 days after a full moon, providing sufficient natural light for nighttime operations. The date was set for June 5th, however on June 4th the forecast was particularly poor, suggesting that it wouldn't be ideal conditions for a successful assault. High winds and rough seas made it exceedingly difficult to launch landing craft, while low clouds threatened to obscure the full moon, crucial for aircraft pilots to identify their targets. A team of meteorologists led by Group Captain James Stagg met with US General Eisenhower late on the 4th of June. They presented their findings and predicted on June 6th that the weather would improve. The next available date would be between June 18th and June 20th, but without the needed full moon. Postponing the invasion to a date 2 weeks later would have been a logistical nightmare. Not only were they concerned about the increased risk of the plan being leaked to the Germans during the extended wait, but any preparations already underway would have to be halted and restarted. The agreement was in place and the date was set to the 6th of June, and the weather aligned exactly as predicted by Stagg and his team. A massive storm ravaged the Normandy coast from June 19th to the 22nd, validating their decision. Had they opted for the 2-week delay, they would have faced yet another postponement, potentially setting the operation back over a month. Stagg owed a debt of gratitude to the 518 Squadron for their invaluable weather reports. Operating with their modified Halifaxes from bases in northern Scotland, they ventured hundreds of miles into the Atlantic, providing Stagg with crucial data to accurately forecast the coming day's weather. This is something the Germans wouldn't have access to. A lot of their reports counted on the findings of Luftwaffe pilots, and as such, they weren't as accurate. In fact, German meteorologists predicted that there would be no break in the weather. They say the forecast was so bad that the German commander in Normandy, Erwin Rommel, was so confident that there wouldn't be an invasion that he went back to Germany to give his wife a 50th birthday present. The Allied invasion commenced late on June 5th and early on June 6th. The first troops on the ground were paratroopers and glider-borne airborne troops. The Normandy invasion witnessed an extraordinary utilisation of gliders, revolutionising the transport of troops and vital resources. These aircraft, towed by transport or bomber planes, were released to glide into the designated landing zones. The scale of glider usage on D-Day was remarkable, with over 650 gliders taking part on D-Day.
The troops landing on the beaches weren't the first Allied forces to arrive in Normandy, so actually in the very early hours of D-Day, the early minutes really, you had some of the airborne troops starting to arrive. So famously on the east side of the landings with the British airborne troops, you had 6 gliders land to capture 2 key bridges there, including Pegasus Bridge, a really famous action, and also on both sides around about the same time. So in the Americans in the west and the British in the east, you also had the first Pathfinder, or the Pathfinders land. So these were small groups of paratroops who landed and then set up various equipment to signal to the main body of the airborne troops who were coming on behind to try and make sure they landed in the right spot. Also actually around about the same time you also had French SAS landing in Brittany to do various operations connected to D-Day as well.
Tasked with paving the way for the subsequent landings, these airborne units were given a critical mission, known as Operation Tonga. This operation identified 3 key objectives essential for success, aiming to secure vital ground points and provide maximum protection for the incoming landing troops. The first objective was the capture of the Con Canal and the Orne River bridges intact. These 2 bridges were the only exit eastward for the British forces, and if they failed to capture the bridges, it would allow the German reinforcements an easy route to the landings. The second was the capture and control of the Merville gun battery. Intelligence believed the gun battery was composed of 150mm guns that would be able to reach the British landings at Sword Beach. The third and final objective was the destruction of 5 bridges to the east of the Orne River. This would interrupt and prevent a counterattack from the area. Operation Tonga proved to be a success, with all designated objectives completed within the allotted timeframe. Despite facing formidable German opposition, the battery was effectively disabled, albeit at a heavy cost with a casualty rate of 50%. These efforts played a crucial role in facilitating the successful landings at Sword Beach, highlighting Operation Tonga's greater impact on the D-Day operation. At 6:30 AM, the Allied divisions began their landings at the 5 designated beaches. However, the victory was hard won, particularly at Omaha Beach, where the Allied forces faced the heaviest casualties of the operation. Omaha Beach encountered a series of setbacks from the outset. The planned support from amphibious swimming tanks, known as DD tanks, designed to navigate through water with flotation screens and propellers, failed. These specialist tanks had been tested in seas with waves up to 1 foot in height, but on D-Day itself the waves were 6 feet high, with the waves literally swamping these swimming tanks.
What we've got here is actually a briefing model that was used, so it dates from World War II, it's not a later model. It's on loan from the Tank Museum, so we're grateful for them for that. So it's a real model that was used in World War II for briefing troops who are going to be operating these tanks. Briefing would have been really important because they were so different from a normal tank. It's obviously got this canvas screen around it held up with struts. The science behind it is simply that it displaces enough water that the tank floats. So even though this is a normal Sherman tank underneath there, and most of the tank would be underwater, and the driver's still inside, which would take a brave man to do that. The tank is still able to swim, and they were fitted with propellers at the rear so that they could move through the water like a boat, but obviously not particularly fast because it's not particularly streamlined. The screen, once it got to land, it was all rigged up so that they could set off small explosive charges and the screen would just drop. And so you do see photos, for example, of later on D-Day of DD tanks on the land, and they're quite distinctive because they've got this, the remains of this screen that's now dropped down, you can see it around the side of the tank.
Once ashore, US forces faced a heavy onslaught of enemy fire coming from the cliff tops, resulting in many casualties. The chaotic conditions led to the mixing of different infantry units, further complicating the situation. On the eve of the beach landings, Allied bombers conducted airstrikes targeting German beach defences. Omaha Beach experienced the least impact from these bombings. Thick fog and low clouds obscured the targets, causing the bombs to miss and detonate several kilometres away from the beaches. By the close of June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach had been captured, but not without the loss of life. Around 3,000 American troops had died in the intense fighting, and Omaha Beach now had the nickname Bloody Omaha. Juno Beach spanned approximately 10 kilometres and extended on either side of the small port of Courcelles-sur-Mer. Like Omaha Beach, Juno faced unfavourable landing conditions. Offshore reefs caused a delay in the assault, pushing the landing time to 7:45 to ensure the landing craft could safely clear the reef as the tide rose. Troops eventually landed on Juno Beach, albeit 10 minutes later than originally planned, and a full 3 hours after high tide. This delay caused substantial challenges for Canadian engineers who were unable to clear vital paths to the beach due to submerged defences. What were some of the challenges the men landing at Juno Beach? What did they face?
So Juno Beach was the Canadian beach. Yeah. Some of the troops landing later on were British, so it wasn't entirely Canadians, but they were largely Canadians, and all the assault troops were Canadians. One of the particular challenges that the Canadians faced at Juno Beach was the strength of the German defences right actually along the back of the beach. So in quite a lot of places there were houses that had been fortified, for example, and there was quite a high sea walls that meant that physically getting off the beach to go inland meant you couldn't just walk over it. You had to have a ladder or something to climb over it, and then obviously the Germans had put other defences like barbed wire. And if you kind of put yourself in put yourself in the shoes of the troops when they landed, when the troops landed on all the beaches, but equally on Juno, the tide was quite far out, so it was starting to come in, but it was quite far out. And the reason for that was that the beach obstacles, which could potentially sink landing craft, the idea was that they'd be left high and dry, so that you'd land and it wouldn't be an obstacle. Because the tide was quite far out, there was quite a lot of beach to cross, so all the assault troops had to cross that beach under fire. It's an open beach, so there's nowhere to hide really, so that was a very difficult and dangerous moment for them, lots of casualties. At Juno Beach, what the Canadians found, that because their landings had been delayed slightly compared to, although the planned time for HR had been delayed slightly compared to Golden Sewell beaches, the adjacent British beaches. And the reason for that was that there were some shoals off the beach, and the idea was just to allow the water, make sure there was enough water to get over those without grounding. But that meant that, and then actually on D-Day itself, the landings on Juno were delayed a little bit longer, another 10 minutes. And those added up to the fact that when the assault troops started landing, the tide had actually more or less reached those beach obstacles. So in the early part of the landings, they're actually having to land amongst the beach obstacles. So basically big wooden or steel obstacles designed to tip over or sink landing craft. Some of them had mines or explosive shells on. So if the craft struck that, it could blow the front of the craft off. Really difficult and dangerous landings there.
Approximately 30% of the landing craft designated for Juno were either destroyed or damaged. With tanks and armoured vehicles delayed, Canadian forces bore the brunt of enemy artillery fire alone for an extended period. However, when the tanks finally arrived, they played a pivotal role in turning the tide of battle. The human cost of D-Day was immense. Allied calculations indicated that at least 10,000 men had died, been injured or gone missing, with over 6,000 of those casualties being American soldiers. Yet 155,000 troops were ashore and in control of 80 square miles of the French coast. There was still much hard fighting to come, however the Allies now had a foothold in enemy-occupied Europe, and the push to victory could begin. From that point forward, they flooded Normandy with men, equipment and supplies of war.